走り出せ走り出せ空高く鳩と差し
Hi guys, it's Wasabi Fold here, bringing to you another One Piece theory, and today we are going to be talking about Catarina Devon, the female pirate that is a member of the Blackbeard crew currently, and one of the level 6 prisoners that escaped from Impel Down. And this character, on the surface, has quite a bit of hype in that she has been said to be the most dangerous female criminal in the golden age of piracy. One of the most dangerous female criminals to ever grace the halls of Impel Down. She is an incredibly dangerous pirate, and I think she's going to be a very strong individual, and I'm really happy about that because we need some stronger female characters in One Piece. But what is also important to note about this character is that we know very little about her. Oda has given us a little bit of a taste, and at first, while trying to make this theory, I didn't think there was going to be much to go on. But after doing a lot of research into a potential historical figure that could have inspired her, as well as a lot of mythological concepts that seem to be tied to her, I think I have come up with a pretty solid idea for what her powers could be. So I urge you guys to stay with me as we go through this journey. So where to start? And I think the best place to start is to start exactly where Oda himself started. In an SBS, Oda basically gave us some very early sketches of what Catarina's design was originally like in his mind. And in that design, we can see the usual classic Oda traits when it comes to designing women. Very pretty, she had long hair. The only defining difference about her physically was she had these little cat ears, and she was supposed to be a swordswoman of the Blackbeard pirates. But in the end, Oda realized that this design was far too cute and not appropriate for the theme of the vulgar kind of pirate that he was going for with the Blackbeard pirate crew. And I'm so glad he did this because we need more diversity in the way our female characters look. But I think in looking to make her more vulgar, I think Oda found inspiration in a particular character that eventually heavily influenced Devon's design, and I think led to Devon eventually having the name Catarina. I think is basically in reference to the character that I think inspired Oda's change in her design. So I think Oda pretty much ditched almost every feature about his original sketches, and it is because of this particular historical figure known as Catarina Devon. I probably butchered that last name, so I'll just refer to her as Catalina from now onwards. But basically, this is a very famous female criminal, fugitive, whatever you want to call her, who lived during the late 1600s and early 1700s. And her escapades, as described in her memoirs, really paint a picture of someone you would consider to be the worst female pirate of a generation, or should I say worst female criminal. Catalina Devon, besides her name and her physical features, she was very masculine. As we can see, Catarina Devon is also very masculine. She was the exemplary female criminal. She has a long-winded history and incidents described in her memoirs of killing people and getting out of it by finding sanctuary in a church. She's also referred to as the lieutenant nun, who basically ran away from the convent and lived a life very unbecoming of what a typical Catholic woman would be. She spent most of her life cross-dressed as a man under different identities, and basically moved from place to place, getting into fights and ending up killing many people and usually getting away with it simply by finding sanctuary in a church. It's a cycle that she repeats constantly. She at one point joined the military, and her attitude towards the Native Americans during that era was one of the many reasons why she had to end up leaving the military, because she was so brutal in the way she handled them. This is the kind of vile character that Oda, I think, used to inspire Devon. Racist, immoral, had no problem killing people, stealing from people, playing with people's emotions. At several points, while dressed as a man, she would seduce women and was even engaged to marry several of them, but would always ditch out at the last minute for fear of being, discovered until she eventually used that fact that she was a woman to get out of a very serious situation where at one point she killed a police officer in a police station in broad daylight with many witnesses. So she's that kind of crazy criminal, just leaving a whole bunch of bodies in her wake. And for some reason, she has gained very mythological status among Spanish culture, because at the end of the day, she did not actually receive punishment for what serious punishment, I should say. She basically ended up escaping execution twice and ended up with a pardon from the Pope. And it's a really crazy story, and some of it is, disputed by historians, but I think Oda based Catarina Devon on this character, and I think because of that, I think we can actually, come to the conclusion that Devon is going to be a very direct fighter. Military training, she's probably going to be very good with numerous weapons, and I think that plays into her name, which is the Crescent Moon Hunter. And actually, I'm going to move on to that name, because that name is probably the next big indicator about what could have inspired Catarina Devon's character. That name basically has the symbolism of the moon in it. You don't just throw that name around willy-nilly. There's a reason why Oda would reference the crescent moon in relation to Devon as the type of hunter that she was. And when you look into mythology, the moon and hunting are actually tied together quite a bit. Both the Greek and Roman goddesses of the hunt are also doubled as the goddesses of the moon. Also, just as a side note, they also are said to have the ability to talk and control animals and a very high affinity for woodland areas. More on that idea later, but I actually believe that's going to play a part. But for all intents and purposes, the moon and the hunt in several cultures and mythologies are tied together. Native American culture as well ties the significance of the moon to hunting. And in fact, it is because of the Native American influence that actually ended up with the what we call the hunter's moon. That is an actual full moon. Every full moon has its own name, but the hunter's moon is basically the moon after the harvest moon, and it's the last full moon before winter, and it was usually considered a great night to hunt because of how bright the moon's light was, and it allowed hunters to see very clearly in the dark, and you expected to have plentiful hunts during this moon. So in my opinion, Catarina Devon is clearly being tied to this mythology. When you look at her portrayal so far, the only thing that we have as an inkling towards her fighting style is that instance where she used a spear back in Marineford. Diana, the Roman goddess of the hunt and the moon, is also depicted in some instances with a spear, but for her primary weapon, her main weapon is actually a bow and arrow, and I think that would be really, really cool if Oda had Catarina Devon use a bow and an arrow, basically be a hunter. She'd also be reminiscent of the Kuja tribe. And a small note about the Kuja tribe, they have clearly been heavily inspired in their themes by these two Greek goddesses, because Oda really does have them use spears and bows and arrows a lot. And I'm not saying that she came from Amazon Lily at all. I don't think it is important whether she did or not, but I think Catarina Devon is definitely being tied to these Greek goddesses. And I think her abilities, for the most part, as in how she fights, will be very weapon-based, like she is hunting her opponent. But beyond that, we have to look at the symbolism of the moon itself, and I think the moon is going to play a very important role, especially when you consider another feature about Devon, one that I haven't mentioned yet intentionally for this moment. Devon has a very long nose, which makes her seem like she would be a witch. And a lot of people have basically made theories stating that, okay, she's just going to have witch-like powers and that's it. However, I think there's more significance to the witch aspect when you look at, the Wiccan faith, which is a small religion. Some people consider a cult, but it is as close to witchcraft as you would find in today's modern religions. But Wiccans basically place a lot of significance on the hunter's moon. In fact, they refer to it as the fallen leaf moon, and it is considered to be the time of year when the boundaries between the two worlds are at their very thinnest, and they believe that you can potentially have visions or get visits from people from another side. And I looked into this specifically because I figured, well, she does have some kind of witch connection, that's obvious, but how would Oda visualize this when considering everything else that could have inspired her character? And I think what Oda will actually do is have Catarina have a power that can somehow change the state of your perception of the world itself. Basically, I think she'll have a power of a similar class to Law's Devil Fruit. Now, Law's Devil Fruit obviously gives him the ability to control a space. I think Devon, however, will be more based on illusions. She would basically transport you to a space where she is the lord and master of that space, similarly to Law's control, and she would create the illusion that references the mythology around her hunting. Maybe there will be a moon in the sky when it's the middle of the day or whatever, and it'll be trees and very hidden, the perfect place for a hunter to have that vantage point. And I think she'll be able to replicate the perception of being a witch because of her having total control over this space. So the name I've given to this fruit is the Dream Fruit. At its core, I think the most important thing is that the fruit gives Catarina Devon an illusion space where she can trap herself and another enemy inside of it, and basically take her time hunting that enemy using her very powerful weapon skills. She'll probably be very proficient with a sword, spear, and maybe even a bow and arrow as well. And I think she'll have very strong Haki, because when you look back at Catarina Devon, that character that I talked about that could have historically inspired her, that character had a very strong will. She was a very strong-willed individual, lived a very solitary, lonely life, did what she want, fought who she want, got into people's faces. She's the kind of character that you would think, if brought into One Piece, would have very strong Haki, and I think Devon will definitely have very strong Haki. But there's one thing that I wanted to touch on finally in this video, and that is the last ability of the Greek goddess Artemis and the Roman goddess Diana, which was this affinity to talk to and control animals. And I didn't think of it much at first, but when I was actually finishing off these ideas, I realized that this is an ability that could very well already exist in One Piece. It's not something that Oda has to have, actually play a part in her fight, like her, she's controlling animals or whatnot. But what if Devon had Conqueror's Haki? Now I know what you're going to be saying, no one in Blackbeard's crew is going to have it, or maybe only Blackbeard would have it. But you know what? We have seen crews before where members within the crew have also had Conqueror's Haki. And there's no reason to believe that at a late stage in the story, as when this Blackbeards, for instance, will be actually fighting, that Conqueror's Haki would still be something that, we haven't seen a lot of. I expect to see a ton of characters with it, and I think Catarina Devon could actually have Conqueror's Haki, because it would reference directly her ability, or should I say the ability of the goddess Artemis to talk to and control animals. And then I actually started to think about her name. If she's based on Catarina Devon, that really does sound very similar to what we would call in One Piece a D. I don't want to get too much into these theories, but what if Catarina Devon is actually Catarina Devon? Who knows what her abilities could be, but I think it would be a really interesting fight if she actually did have Conqueror's Haki, and Catarina Devon further cements, her mythos, or how strong she is as the most dangerous female pirate of the Golden Pirate Age. Wouldn't it be interesting if Blackbeard had another D among his crew? I'm not saying, of course, that has to happen at all, because when you actually read the memoirs of Catalina, she was a very strong-willed person that is more symbolic of the goddess of the hunt. So that is my prediction for Catarina Devon's abilities. Tell me what you guys think. I know that this has been a pretty long video, but I hope you guys stayed with me till the end. And thank you guys for listening. This is Wasabi Fold signing out.